Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I'm Joe Baya, and this week I'm joined with Capt. Patric Garmison. Capt. Patric, Butch is down for the count, man. Last time I saw him, he looked green around the gills. I think he's got the crud, man. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing fantastic.
You enjoying this fall fishing?
Yeah, man. Fall fishing has been good to me and my customers. It's been, it's not the speckled trout conveyor belt of fall fishing, but there's a plethora of things that we've been able to target this fall. A lot of stuff happening. So if we're finding one fish, a lot of times we're finding a handful, maybe 6 or 10 fish, and that might be speckled trout, redfish, puppy drum, sheephead. A lot of action, and it's been a lot of fun. So,
well, I'm looking forward to hearing more about the inshore side of things a little bit later on when we talk to Captain Richard Rutland, and you and he can compare notes somewhat on what you've been chasing. I know Richard's been after the flounder pretty good. We got a really cool story coming up on an almost 10-pound southern flounder, which is a giant in this area. I'm looking forward to hearing the story on that. But before we get there, this week's show is brought to you guys by Geico and your local Geico insurance office. Everybody knows Geico has great auto rates, but did you know they also have great rates on boats, ATVs, motorcycles, and personal watercraft? You guys give Ron Davis a call at 251-445-0053. Not only will Ron work hard to get you the lowest premium possible, but you'll have the service you can expect and count on if you ever need to make a claim. And Geico does even more than insure your valuable items. They also offer on-the-water services like towing, battery jumps, gas delivery, and you can save by bundling these services with your insurance. If you're an Alabama saltwater fisherman, support the local insurance agent who helps bring you this fishing report each week. Call Ron Davis, Geico agent, at 251-445-0053 or visit him online at geico.com/mobile-al. All right, Captain Patric, let's go down and talk to Captain Blood and see what's going on with these flounder. What you say, Captain Blood?
What's going on, Smoking Joe and Ugly Fishing? What's going on, fellas?
Man, I just want to get right to it. Tell me about this almost 10-pound flounder you guys caught.
Man, golly, what a day it was. I tell you, it was, first of all, the thing I think about when I think about that day when we caught that fish, it was just, we started out, it was a really tough day for us starting out. We had a very, very long period, I would say about 3.5 hours that we burned up in the morning trying to catch bait. We've really been kind of honing in on catching these fish on finger mullet, and we had a real hard time catching bait that morning. It was real cloudy conditions. It just rained the night before, so we had some dirty water around, and we spent way more time than I would have liked to catching bait. But we finally made some bait, throwing the cast net, and got out around some structure, and it was my second cast in there. I felt the thump. It wasn't like a bone jarring thump like I would have thought it'd been from a fish that size. Maybe I just didn't have my line tight, but I set the hook and it started pulling a bunch of drag, and everybody was kind of saying redfish because we had just caught 2 reds right before that bite. Everybody was saying redfish. Oh man, redfish. And then it pop up. I see brown, and I said, "Oh, get the net." And man, I was about to throw one of the Sea Lab guys overboard, Steven Stang. I was about to throw him overboard because I kept telling him to get. I was up on the bow trying to fight the fish and trying to get him moving while they were getting the net because we had a redfish in the boat that they were trying to tag. I told him, get behind me. And he came right up in front of me like with a damn, like he had a sword. And he could chop my rod in half. And anyway, it got up there, and I got the fish turning in the net. It came in the boat. And it was one of those things that kind of, for me, it took a little while to set in how big it was,
Yeah.
Because I knew it was a big one. I didn't know it was 10 pounds big, But I was tickled that, we got the fish in the boat, had a real good hook set, right in his jaw, so we didn't have to deal with a gut hook or anything like that. I got my boga grip out, and I could see 10 pounds on the boga, so I knew it was a good one. So we got him in the live well, and he was doing good. We fished maybe about another hour or so, and some rain set in on us, and so we ran into the industrial canal and went over there and weighed him at Jimmy Knowles' place at Deer River Bait, and almost made 10. He was 986 on the scale. So definitely biggest one ever caught. If I had to say, I'll never catch another one that big.
That's a lifetime fish, man. I've always really appreciated those real big flounder mounts. So I think you need to have one of those in your future.
Yeah,
cool.
I think I am. We got some good measurements on him. He was 25 inches long on the nose. He was 13 and a half inches wide at his widest point, and 2.5 inches thick.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Wow.
You should have seen his stomach too. His stomach looked like he swallowed a baseball. Already been gorging and ate another mullet. You know, it just tells you that this time of the year, the fish are definitely on the chew. They're about to make their migration south out into the Gulf. So I assume that they're doing like a lot of animals do before they're about to make a big move. They gorge. They gonna eat anything that moves.
Well, that's a great story, and I know you've been doing a lot more flounder fishing. Y'all were able to tag that fish and release it healthy, which is great to hear. That's going to be a big time breeder fish. I imagine it's a female. Did you learn that from can they tell, the guys you're working with the Sea Lab, or did they just know anything about it?
Well, with what's that place over there, Patrick in Orange Beach, or Foley, that does the Claw Petite place? They've learned and kind of taught us that the male flounder are much smaller. It's very rare to see a male flounder bigger than about 15 inches.
Wow.
So we assume that great big fish was a female, and that it's very rare to actually catch a male flounder. That's news to me. But
you've gotten to string together a lot of flounder fishing, and that's something that we get question upon question about is flounder fishing. So let's deep dive a little bit. What have you learned besides needing to have good bait? Are you seeing, one of the things I've always been curious about in our fishery is structure and man-made versus natural bottom. Are you catching more of your fish on what type of structure?
Definitely rocks, man. Rocks. They really, really, really like rocks. Any kind of rocks that you can find, whether in shallow water or deep water, are very, very, very productive areas. They love structure in general. Now, in the past, I've done very well around like pilings, like dock pilings and stuff like that. But this go round, this time of the year, for me here in the past couple of weeks since we've been doing all this, it's definitely been almost every fish has come around some rocks. And it's one of those things where I feel like when I'm fishing them, you're not getting hung up and breaking off and going through a lot of hooks and leader and lead and swivels and the whole 9 yards. You're really not doing it right. You have absolutely got to be in there on top of that structure or right on the edge of those structures to get bites.
Man, Richard, I couldn't agree more with that. With your theory on breaking off tackle, it's one of those bittersweet events that, if you're not breaking off, you're not catching fish, and it's it's a struggle that some people have to have a difficult time wrapping their head around that. It's like, well, if I'm constantly hung up, I'm constantly broke off, but that's where the fish live, and that's where the better, that's a lot of times where they are when they're feeding. That's interesting that you're bringing that up.
I've learned a few little tricks to combat the breaking off when you're fishing those rocks. When I'm Carolina rigging a live bait, I'm definitely trying to fish the lightest weight possible that I can use to keep my bait down on the bottom. With finger mullet, that's kind of hard depending on the size. If you've got like a big 6-7 inch finger mullet, you need at least a half ounce, if not a 3/4 ounce weight to keep him down. But anywho, using the lightest means necessary to get your bait down. And when you swap over to an artificial, because we've got several of these fish on artificial, definitely the finger mullet have been the bait of choice. But with artificial, just taking your time and going slow and really feeling what's going on, that's something that braided line has really, really helped me with a lot, is to be able to feel the rock and hit the rock before you get hung, you know what I mean? Before you pick up and bow the rod up. If you can almost feel the rock before you start pulling the line tight, a lot of times you can kind of just lightly jiggle it off, because when you start putting a ton of pressure on the rod tip, trying to get that grub out of there, or even your Carolina rig, if you can kind of stay light on your rod tip, a lot of times you can jiggle it off of there. And then something that works good for me is that little snap in the line. I kind of bow the rod tip up, load the rod tip up big time, and then I pull the line back like a bow and arrow almost and let go of it and snap it. And a lot of times you can snap it and then kind of just jiggle it right off after that. It works. It works for me a lot more than you would think.
Richard,
I don't know if you...
Richard, you're talking about the artificial fishing. When it comes to that, one of the questions I've always had in my head when I'm flounder fishing is, do I want to drag that bait along the bottom? So when I'm doing it, I'm keeping my rod tip low and sometimes even just slowly reeling the bait and kind of pulling it along the bottom where I'm keeping contact with the bottom or whatever's there the entire time. Or do I want to hop that bait just slightly, and let it pick up off the bottom and hit the bottom again? And my thought process on that is, and I'm still not sure what to do, but my thought process is if I'm dragging the bait along the bottom, especially with the Carolina rig, if I'm dragging it into a flounder's path, I may hit him with that weight before the bait gets to him. What are you doing?
So we'll start with artificial first. When I'm doing a grub, I really like these curly tail grubs. Fight Club makes a nice curly tail, and so does Gulp with their swimming mullet. And what I do is I kind of tap the rod twice, and it's a real light little flutter. And if you look at that grub in the water, like next to the boat, that little curly tail makes a nice little flutter each time. And so I usually do like a 2-hop, like a bam bam little thing, but it's real light. It's not like I would work it for a trout or a redfish. I would only say maximum I'm picking up the bait about a foot up off the bottom before I'm dropping my rod tip. The dragging method does work, like what you're talking about. That'll work too, but I feel like that little bit of bottom relief and even that weight in grub hitting the bottom even gets their attention a little bit more so, maybe in my opinion, than just dragging it along. And then with a Carolina rig, I'm throwing it out there, and I like to, I think I talked about in the last show when we were talking about flounder, I hook my finger mullet in the back and have the bait almost swimming away from my weight the whole time. And so I just reel it about a foot or two each time. And I'll usually let it sit for about anywhere from probably about 10 to 15 seconds or so in each little spot. And then I'll reel it about a foot. I'm not really picking it up and dropping it. I'm almost dragging it back. I'm not really picking it up.
You're not so much thinking of dragging that bait necessarily in front of the fish. It's more like just dragging that bait into a new area and letting him kind of make like a semicircle, like 180 degrees away from that lead, and hopefully finding flounder that are, in that.
That's right. You're working about like a 1.5, depending on your water clarity too. 'Cause we caught some of these fish in some really dirty water, but you're working about anywhere from a 1 to 2 foot little lane every time you throw a finger mullet, in my opinion. He's making all kinds of movement, flashing, swimming along. You're going to get that fish's attention if you get it past him. And you don't want to fish one cast for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? It's usually about a 4 or 5 minute cast or so, and then I'm picking up and throwing again.
I've always heard with flounder that those fish like to lay in. They like to lay out of the current, but near an area that has current, so they can have that bait washing over the top of them and allows them to ambush. What about current or tides? Have you noticed any trends with tidal movement or current with regards to high current areas or even neap tides or low current areas?
So that's a very interesting question there, Joe, because I have definitely picked up on several things in regards to current tidal movement. A lot of the areas that I do well in some of these rivers, like especially Dog River, I'm fishing some eddies, almost where you can see when the tide is screaming out. You got like good water movement either going out or coming in. I'm fishing, and you'll almost see a line, like a current line, where you can see the hard moving water. And then inside of that on a bank where there's some structure, some rocks, or shell or something like that is usually where I'm having my most success. I'm not having a ton of success fishing out in the river current where it's screaming along, and I actually start to want to move places in some of those little eddy areas when I can tell the current's moving too fast, because I'll see my line start to track. You'll throw out at a 90-degree angle away from the boat, perpendicular from the boat. And then by the time you're reeling it in, it's 180 degrees either in front or behind the boat, depending on how you're set up. And that's kind of when I start to pick up on that the current's moving to. You just don't start to get that many bites. And I don't think you're effectively fishing that water very well, you know, because your bait and your weight and everything's just tumbling along the whole way. And then the other thing, too, about tide, you can definitely tell those fish are tuned into that tide, because I really like to be in certain places when the tide changes. You know, if you go into a full tide and it's about to start dropping out, there's several places I like to be right when that water starts moving, because sometimes it's just a flurry of action. I talked about that, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago on here. We were in Mobile River, and all of a sudden we got 4 bites in 5 minutes. And I was kind of wondering why, and I took note that the water started falling out of the Mobile River in the area we were in much faster than it was before. And I went back and I looked at the gauge, at the real-time water gauge, and you could see where there was a drop, and that the tide kind of leveled out a little bit and then started to fall again. Who knows what makes the tide do those kind of things, but it definitely turned on a bite.
I like it. Well, what about, I want to ask both of you guys, what's the water quality in the Delta and also in the estuaries, the tidal rivers?
You want to go on with that, Patrick? I think you've been up in the Delta a little bit this week.
I poked around in the Delta a little bit, and if you're in the main rivers, it is garbage. The current is still moving pretty swiftly, and the water is just slap full of sediment. Now, on the good news in the middle of the river is I talked to Jimmy Knoll, and he said he was up there in Tensall catching shrimp the other day, and he said he dropped his pump down 18 feet over the 30-foot deep hole in Tensall River there at the bridge, and he had 12 parts per thousand salinity at 18 feet deep, which is a plenty of salinity for a speckled trout and especially a redfish to survive in. But then I also I did check up into some flats and some bays like Delvan and Grand Bay, and the water is looking pretty good in there, but there's just not a lot of life. There's some mullet in those areas, just not a whole lot of activity. But on the promising side, also Tom Bigby is dropping out rapidly and will be back down around 10 feet, I think, by Wednesday, and or heck, maybe sooner than that. I may have just made something up, but it's dropping really fast, which is good. And then the Barry steam plant is also dropping too. So, and it remained tidal through this whole this cycle. So anytime it comes in just a little bit, it's still holding and bringing some salt water in with it.
Well, that's not as bad as what we had last year. Hopefully we can keep some of those upstate rains at a normal level, and maybe things will get right. Richard, what about the tidal rivers? I know you do some fishing down in West Fowl, East Fowl, Dog River, more over on seems like on the west side of the bay. How do things look over there?
Dog River got screwed up a little bit with this last little front that came through. The water's still, the salinity is still in there. I can definitely tell there's salinity in there. Just running around looking at the foam in my wake, I can tell that there's still plenty of salinity in there. The water is off color, and I would consider it marginal water clarity in Dog River. Still definitely good enough to fish. Had a couple of good catches in there through the week. Fowl River, I'm getting some report. I haven't been to into East Fowl, but everybody who's been there is going, ugh, like at the water. So, and it takes a lot of rain to really flush the salinity out of Fowl, but there's definitely a degree of dirty water in there. I've been in and out of the industrial canal a few times, and we've caught some fish in there here not too long ago, and the water quality is holding up much better in the industrial canal than either Fowl or Dog. Ran around Dolphin Island on Monday and then also today, and the water quality is very, very good down there. I was catching some, we're talking about these finger mullet for these flounder. I got a couple of flounder trips Thursday and Friday. So I went and caught some finger mullet over at the airport marsh, and I probably could have, I was catching bait over there. I probably could have sight casted about 6 redfish while I was in there bumping around with my trolling motor, if that tells you anything about water clarity. So there's something going on down there too. That kind of, maybe if I didn't have so many charter trips going up, I'd go down there and have a little fun, little me time down there.
So it sounds like flounder fishing, even though it's closed right now, there's fish to be caught and probably going to be getting better and better and better, really. Speckled trout and redfish, bite's been pretty steady for both of you guys?
The speckled trout bite's been really good. And then been sprinkling in those redfish, drum, sheephead kind of as the bonuses or bycatch or however you want to look at it. But
lanyap is the fancy way to say it.
It's been pretty easy to keep the rod bent for sure.
I know Patric's kind of seen this over the years guiding, but you'll have, Patric and I take a lot of local people fishing in our area, and people have this notion that, or this idea that when we get these rains around these fronts and it dirties up some of this water around in the tidal rivers or in the delta or wherever it is, that the fishing is going to be no good. And that is usually not the case. The fish still have to bite. You know what I mean? They still have to eat. I say bite. They don't have to bite, but they still have to eat. They still have to feed to stay alive. And it's really all about just using good tactics, A lot of times this time of year, we want to move over to fishing grubs or to fishing hard baits or catching them on top water or something like that. And the thing Patric and I are good at is not necessarily catching them how we want, but how the fish want. And one tool we use a lot on a regular basis is a popping cork. And I think that really helps the fish hone in on where your bait is, using good colors, using a little scent, things like that. And, like I said, and like Patric said, the speckled trout fishing's been really good here recently. You just got to use the right tactic, so it's nothing to be discouraged by, in my opinion.
The main thing that I've been having a lot of questions, people asking me, how's the water? What's the water like? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, man, it's going to be different every day based on the wind. So go on these leeward shorelines or leeward bays or whatever, anything leeward, and you're going to find some cleaner water. And in those cleaner water areas, the fish are likely going to be there and be ready to eat.
That's a good tip, Patric. We talk about it a lot. It seems like year to year, being a conditions fisherman versus a spot fisherman. And
that's right. That's exactly right, man. Fish those conditions. That's the key. That's the trick to being good at this stuff.
Yep.
Well, Richard, we are not going to let you get out of here without an inshore tip. And this week is brought to us by the Coastal Conservation Association of Alabama. Another great way to support conservation projects like the Claude Petit Flounder Hatchery you were talking about and the University of South Alabama Cobia Tagging Project, which both of those you've participated in, Richard, is through the purchase of a distinctive CCA Alabama Saltwater Fishing license plate. If you head over to the Alabama Department of Revenue's distinctive license plate page at revenue.alabama.gov, you can get yours. Y'all check that out. Well, Richard, what are you thinking? Do you have one?
Heck yeah, I do.
Does it say like ugly on it or something cool, or did you just take what they gave you?
No, it says ugly 2 because my other truck says ugly 1.
Okay. I like it.
Very original, huh?
Yeah, I know it took you a while to come up with that.
Yeah. All right.
What do you think, Richard?
Man, so just with all the flounder fishing that I've been doing, one thing I was thinking about is, and I kind of was talking about a little bit earlier, is bait. These finger mullet that we've been honing in on as this great bait. And when I say that, we fished finger mullet right next to gulps and Fishbites and bull minnows and live shrimp, and the finger mullet have outfished everything, I would say, by 80%. 20% are coming on bull minnows, shrimp, in an artificial grub, and 80% of our fish are coming on finger mullet. So we've really been spending a lot of time each trip trying to catch bait. And I've definitely been getting better at it, but they move around and have tails just like every other fish and move around a lot. And the things I've been doing to hone in on the bait are, number one, the thing that I see the most, that I picked up on the most when I'm finding finger mullet, is finding big mullet. You find a school of big mullet jumping along a bank, there's usually some finger mullet close by. They really like structure just like everything else. I've been having to throw cast net on top of rocks, around rocks. I had a Facebook post a couple of weeks ago where my poor wife was out there at night in between trips, helping me sew my net back together, so we could catch bait the next day. So you're definitely throwing around some rocks sometimes. Sandy banks around grass is really good. I mentioned the airport marsh down at Dolphin Island. That place is loaded up with bait right now, but you can, most of the time it seems like during the summertime there's like finger mullet everywhere you go, and then when it comes time to actually catch some with your cast net, it's a little tougher.
Right.
So, and then as far as cast net selection, I like an 8-foot net. You don't have to get real heavy on your lead line. You don't need like 1.5 pounds per foot on your net. You can go a little lighter, like 1 pound or 1.2 pounds per foot or something. And then I like that about a 3/8 inch mesh size. And getting out there and practicing with your net, I tell you, I watch several YouTube videos and stuff like that to get better at casting.
Yeah, if you ever think you're good at throwing a cast net, just go watch some YouTube videos and you'll realize real quick.
The guy's throwing the 20-foot cast net.
Yeah, I love it. I love watching those videos because it makes me feel like I'm good at it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I got this. And then I get out in the yard and realize, oh, wait a minute. And I got to go back to the phone and watch it again.
Yeah,
but that's great. I mean, it's very true. There's some awesome tutorial videos, and the funny thing is that everybody throws it a little different.
They do. It's just like anything, find your own way. You know what I mean? And I think it starts like what you're talking about, Joe, is getting in the yard and throwing your cast net on some mole cricket to get better at throwing. And the other thing too is a little bit of accuracy goes a long way, because when you see these finger mullets swimming around, they're fast little fish. So you need to be ready. You need to be locked and loaded and ready when you're around them and make a good accurate cast to really load up and what I call black out your live well full of bait, so that you don't have to worry about it the rest of the day. If you go catch 60 or 100 finger mullet in the morning, you don't have to worry about bait the whole rest of the day. Hopefully you have some left over and you're letting them go when you get done. The other thing too that I've definitely noticed is getting on the trolling motor. I like to be on my trolling motor when we're catching bait. For whatever reason, they seem not to be quite as spooky when you're on a trolling motor. Almost setting up a drift. I get my wind direction and my light correct so that I can see up against some of these banks and you can see the mullet before you throw. You want to pick up on, and I'm always looking ahead. I'm always looking 50, 60 feet down the bank for some surface activity that might give away where a school might be, so that I'm ready. And kind of the trick is to see them before they see you. Because as soon as they see you, they're going to start to scatter and they're going to start to move real fast, and it's going to be hard to get your pancake on top of them.
I love it, man. A lot of good stuff this week, Richard. Thanks for being with us, and congrats on that big doormat, man. It's a beautiful fish, and
Golly,
glad you got her back going out in the Gulf and make some babies.
No, we were chit-chatting about that earlier. I think for me, I think the coolest part about it, about the fish, is we were talking about this earlier today. Is I don't know that there's too many flounder out there that are 10 pounds that get caught and then get released back into the water. You know what I mean? Most people catch a 10-pound flounder. It's not usually getting released. You know what I mean? So
you're in the small minority, I'm sure.
It was a pretty cool deal, man. Got lucky as usual. I feel like I'm the luckiest man on the face of the earth most of the time when it comes to fishing. But that was fun. But guys, thanks for having me. Looking forward to listening to the show.
If folks want to get in touch with you and book a trip this fall or this winter, what's the best way for them to do it?
Man, hit me up on Facebook. Shoot me a message to my Facebook page. Check out my website, coldbloodedfishing.com. Probably the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent, buddy. Well, thanks again for being with us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Richard.
All right, boys. Y'all take it easy.
All right, buddy. See you.
Patrick, I don't think I'd know what to do if I saw a 9.5 pound flounder roll up next to the boat. I would hope I would not try to chop it in half with a net.
I have a really good story, just a short one. Me and my buddy Jim Foster were fishing. This was many, many years ago, and he hooks a flounder. We know it's a flounder. I get the net, and I see this doormat come up, and I'm like screaming at him, tell him to calm down and to like steer it over here. Let me get and I'm like, oh my God, it's the biggest flounder I've ever seen. And I'm telling him to calm down, and I finally net it, and it was like a 23 or 24 inch flounder. it was not a 9-pounder. It was only, I think it was only like a 4-pounder. But yeah, I don't know that I could survive a 9-pound flounder coming up to the boat.
No,
anyway, I'm glad they were able to successfully get that thing in the boat. And it didn't sound like anybody freaked out the way I would have.
Well, when you're catching big fish, it tends to be pandemonium no matter who you are. Even if you're calm, cool, and collected, sometimes it just comes out of you. You know, you get excited when you see those fish. And one guy that we talk to pretty regular on here has had his fair share of tangles with big fish is Angelo Depaola, and he's bringing us the Bluewater Report this week. Angelo, welcome back to the show, buddy.
Man, how is it going, guys? Hey, is that the fish that Richard caught that was on Facebook?
That's what we were talking about.
Flounder?
Yeah. Almost 10 pounds.
Dude, I mean, I would have had a hard time popping a tag in that thing.
That's what he said.
Hey, Angelo, I've had your stuffed flounder, and I would have had a tough time putting it away, too.
Oh, man. How's it going, guys?
Oh, we are having a great time, man. We're having a great time. Enjoying this cooler weather. Looks like we got some cold fronts pushing through, but that has not slowed down the blue water fishing. Doesn't sound like. What's been going on out there?
Man, the past couple of weeks, it's like the tuna finally showed up, and it's like the jumbo variety. I mean, if you've seen any of the stuff on social media, lots of guys catching big ones. And what's been very interesting, and I never really paid attention to it till this year, where if you kind of track back the past couple of years, if you look at October, November, kind of December period, lots of big eye tunas. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is. This is the time of year that we get them in the Gulf, but handful of 200-plus pound fish and a fair amount of 150 to 200 pounders. And so fishing's been phenomenal.
Angelo, why does the Bowville Big Game Fishing Club and any of the other, big Marlin tournaments or Marlin series or Blue Water series of tournaments, why have they never done a fall tournament? It seems to pretty much stop right around Labor Day for the most part. I know Destin has a big fishing rodeo in October. I know you got a lot to compete with. You got football games, you got hunting season, you got weather. Is that why?
That, and we've talked about it, just doing some club events. To put on a big tournament, you need 50 boats at least. And you're talking, if you get 25 boats that time of year, that's really good. The other thing you're contending with is the weather.
Right.
I mean, the guys that go out and catch fish this time of year have the flexibility to go when the weather's good. And that's the biggest reason.
Yeah, it's just you just put all that energy and effort into it, and you just kind of 50-50 on if you even can have it or not.
Yeah, I would say even less than 50-50. In the summer, you're 50-50. You're probably 20-80 this time of year. So
seems like it blows every weekend.
I know. Trust me. But yeah, that's the main reason. Kenny Vine's tournament that the Pleasure Island Fishing Club puts on, that's a mid to late September tournament. And I'd say, they're lucky if they go 50-50. The past couple of years, it's been really rough during that tournament.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about these tunas, man. Tell me about tactics. What are these fish coming on? It seems like you got to kind of throw the kitchen sink at them most of the time. Is there anything that's shining as the pattern? Are they chunking or trolling or kiting them?
Man, I tell you, the guys I've talked to, it seems like just about anything you've been putting in the water here lately. Lots of bites on the chunk. This time of year is just, really classic kind of time of year that you chunk them. But heck, man, I had some guys, some buddies of mine, they had one popper on the boat and they promptly lost it. So they started throwing cobia jigs wherever they'd see a flying fish land. They throw the cobia jig over there, and they were hooking up one after the other.
Yeah.
On 100 to 130 pound class yellowfins.
Wow.
And then in the morning, there's little Nerf ball size blackfins, kind of little smaller ones. You said you couldn't hardly live bait for blue marlin because as soon as you put a bait in the water, it got hammered by a tuna.
We're hearing that more and more from just about everybody that's given us a Blue Water Report lately, that they're catching these tuna on those smaller blackfins. And it seems like out there over the years, it's just some kind of little change in a tactic that starts to produce fish. I mean, it used to be that you trolled almost exclusively, and then chunking got to be a thing, and then it was kite fishing, and then everybody had a popper on the bow, and now I'm hearing more and more about guys live baiting these tunas. Is there a blackfin that's too big for a tuna? Like with a marlin, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Man, I've caught tunas on like 4 or 5 pound blackfins before. Yeah. I mean, I would think if you put a 10 pounder out there, I just have a hard time seeing a 130 pound fish choking that down. But my guess, you know what? We caught a 170 pound tuna this year on probably a 10 pound bonita. So yeah, they'll eat them. You got to let them go for a little bit. And the nice thing is you hook them on that tackle, you're usually fishing minimum 150, 200 pound test on a little bit heavier tackle. So you can, I don't know, I like to put a little heat on them. That to me is fun. Yeah. What isn't fun is fighting one for 2 hours on a spinning rod.
Right.
It's fun for the first 10 minutes, and then you're getting your rear end handed to you for the next period of time.
Angelo, when I was charter fishing a lot, one of the things that I used to really harp on with my anglers was with tuna, it seems like you really need to put as much pressure on that fish as you can and get him coming to the boat. Do not let him get his head turned away from you. It's what I see quite often is way too big of pumps. They're trying to pump the rod tip up and then make a whole bunch of line back by dropping that rod tip. And all you're letting that fish do is get his head going away from you when you do that. But the other thing I used to see a lot was we would fight a fish. Anytime we fought a fish for more than about 20 to 30 minutes, I would say we break off, 30% of those fish. And, that line just sits in the corner of their mouth and eventually chafes through. And I just always told my guys, put the heat on them, man. If we're going to break them off, I want to break them off in the first 5 minutes, as not 45 minutes later. Let's go catch another one if we break it off. What do you do?
Quite often, you have like maybe a 2-3 hour window when they're biting.
Right.
It's not like you said, you go 2.5 hours on one fish, the whole thing could be over. So, we're kind of talking about tips of the week. My tip is I like to start with as heavy a leader as I can get away with, and then we scale down from there. We've kind of got in this mindset that we got to fish really light leaders and small hooks to get bites. But like if you're marking tons of fish and you're seeing them eating, like I'd rather start especially on the chunk or if you're fishing smaller live baits like little hardtails or thread fins or scarred minnows, I'd like to start at like 100 pound test. The 100 pound test leader, you can put some heat on them.
Right.
And if they're biting that, you may be able to go to 150. I think that it's a misconception of the years is like in the fish, I'm not sure if you guys see it, but I feel like they get smarter, especially as the pressure increases. And I think that's why you see a changing in tactics periodically, because somebody does something or tries something and all of a sudden it works and it kind of gets out there. It just kind of that knowledge base spreads faster and faster because of shows like this, social media and fishing forums and all that, which is,
I'll take all the blame.
Well, I think it's a good thing. I think the more people we have in this sport, the more likely we are to be able to preserve it and lobby for regulations and everything else that affects it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that mentality. And that's a good point because I'm that guy. It's like, well, we got to go to 60 pound leader. That's what we caught them on last time. Let's just start there. But maybe not. It's like when we're trolling and whenever we get a tuna to bite the islander, behind the bird, we're always like, yes, we get some more stronger leader to actually wire the fish as opposed to having to play with him for 20 minutes as he's circling right underneath the stern. So that's a good tip. I like that. Start big, work your way down. There's no harm in that. And I haven't been doing that. And what about Wahoo? Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
Man,
I was going to say that even in the inshore world, I've been doing that. Like I've been using a lot stronger, heavier duty hooks and leader line starting out there and then working my way down if I'm not getting bites. And a lot of times I find that it's not as critical as I thought it was. And now if we're trout fishing and then all of a sudden we hook a 40-inch bull redfish, we actually get that thing in the boat and we don't have to baby it for 45 minutes to try to get it in. We're able to get it in 10 minutes, get some photos, and get it released.
Patrick, what do you feel like on the inshore side? What do you feel like's too big?
Too big? Man, I've gone as high as 50-pound test and been able to catch speckled trout, redfish, everything inshore that I'd want to catch.
Muddy water, baby. Gotta love that muddy water.
Yeah, take that dirty water, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to cut y'all off, but I wanted to interject.
Oh,
no. So what about wahoo, Angelo? This time of year with colder temperatures, we usually get a push.
Man, fair amount of wahoos. I wouldn't say people are going out and catching 10, 15 of them. But if you're going out and fishing along the edge, you know, you control islanders. You control a mix of like Yozuri Bonita or something that you control at lower speed with islanders. You can high speed troll, cover a little bit more ground. And all those rigs kind of on the shelf that are in that like 300 to 400 range, you know, as you kind of look northwest of the Petronas, this is the time of year that that somebody catches a donkey out there. But, you know, you got to put in a little bit of time. You got to fish for them. They're out there, and you get it on the right day, right time, you're going to catch a bunch of them.
Hey, Angelo, can I'm going to ask from the novice perspective on wahoo fishing, if I wanted to take off in my bay boat and go and try to catch a wahoo, and it sounds like maybe this is the time of the year to do it if we caught a nice calm day, just the general, as far as distance from shore, whether it be Orange Beach or Dolphin Island or whatever, what would be a distance we would need to travel, and what would be maybe some tactics we could do from a center console boat?
All right, so let's say you're going out in your bay boat, because this is the time of year you can go do that, and they're stacked up usually. What I find is most people, especially when they're trolling, they want to get in that 400 or 500 foot of range, 600 foot of water. You want to catch them there. I think you're better off fishing that 180, 150 foot range to about 300, 350, which you'll find. And if you're leaving out of Orange Beach, it's hard to do it out of Dolphin Island because you really got to run to the west to get to these kind of ledges that are a really reasonable run. And about 18 miles south of Fort Walton Beach, there's a little ledge over there, and it's a hard drop. It goes from 180 to 200 instantly. You'll see the drop on your bottom machine. And it's about a 30, 35-mile run to the southeast out of Orange Beach. It's due south out of Fort Walton Beach. You can pick up TK 101, and you can see the condos on a nice clear day like we get here in the fall. And you're going to get good wahoo fishing over there. The dolphin are usually still in, especially considering the weather we've had lately, and whites and sails. And for me, like if I'm going to go fish that area, and I kind of I think that's kind of to me a mixed bag. You're going to get some black fins and stuff too, and then occasionally you're going to get a blue marlin or a giant tuna. So you almost got to be a little bit aware of that could happen.
Okay. So
on the flat lines, I either like a pretty small planer, an island or ballyhoo, or like any kind of shaky bait, man stretch 30, a Rapala, something like that.
Okay.
And then, you know, I used to fish a lot of boats that didn't have any outriggers. We just run two islanders. If I didn't have outriggers, we just run two islanders further back without the outriggers. And you'd be surprised, you know, you'd catch a lot of fish that way. If you have outriggers, put you some islanders, put you some old craft chuggers or something on there, you're going to catch a lot of fish. With the shaky baits, what I find is if you put single strand, since they wiggle a lot, they tend to break the leader. If you troll, you know, it's just, 7-strand is kind of where you want to go with that.
Angelo, what's your preferred trolling speed for these wahoo?
Man, you know, if you're going to high speed, you know, you can troll up 15 to 20 knots. You get a lot of speed. You know, the problem is on a monohull boat, that's like that speed where you're just really pushing water. Mm-hmm. And so your fuel consumption goes away. if I'm trolling, not high speed trolling, I like 6 to 8.5 knots, depending on, I think you got to kind of look at weather conditions, sea conditions, and kind of how your boat trolls. Outboard boats, to me, troll better at a slightly slower speed. So, 6.5, 7.5 knots tends to be a sweet spot. On inboard power boats, you can bump that up 8 to 10 knots if you want to cover a little bit more ground.
That's a good segue into this week's Hey Cap question, Angelo. You got it. And this week is brought to us by Daycool Heating and Air. Patrick, I love getting questions from our readers like this one we're about to have for all the fishing specialists we have on here each week. There's really nothing like going to the expert to shorten the learning curve. And just like the fishing specialists we have on the fishing report each week, Daycool Heating and Air are home performance specialists. What does that mean? That means they will inspect your property and find leaking air ducts, hoses, clean out ductwork, and find HVAC problems before they become nightmares. So check out the heating and cooling specialists who bring you the inshore, offshore, and onshore fishing specialists each week, and mention this ad for a free home performance diagnostic. Contact them at 251-633-5121 or online at www.daycoolair.com or the Daycool Heating and Air mobile app. They are license number Alabama 07028. Patrick, you had some experience with Daycool here recently, didn't you?
Yeah, man. I got Brandon Day over to the house. I had a HVAC unit at my house that's been in desperate need of removal and reinstallation. Brandon came by. We walked through the house. We came up with a plan for what was going to best fit my house and estimate. He had he pulled the estimate up real quick on his iPad, and we went over the options, and man, I made a nice choice. And anyway, we had that executed, got the work done. Communication was great with the office. Every time there was a technician or somebody supposed to come out to the house, we got a text message that said who was coming, and heck, maybe even a little bit of backstory about the technician, that they like to fish in the mountains of Nebraska or something like that. So, I mean, there was some cool stuff that they have going on, and I highly recommend them, and I appreciate them supporting the podcast.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have have a local podcast and be able to have local businesses that can be a part of it. And we definitely appreciate the guys over at Daycool. But let's get to that Hey Cap question. All right, Angelo. Quinn Harrelson said, I noticed Angelo talked about water temperature change, and that clued him into starting his trolling. How much of a change in water temperature does it take to say, okay, guys, this is the place. Let's get some baits out? What do you think, Angelo?
I think that depends on a lot of what you're catching. If you've been fishing all day, you ain't got any bites, and you all of a sudden come across a 0.3 degree temperature change, like to me, like I've been fishing in a desert all day, I'm going to start boxing that area to kind of see what's going on. And that's a short answer. I mean, obviously you'd like to see a 1 to 3 degree temperature break, but I can't tell you how many times we come up on a 0.5 degree temperature break. And it's what you find is there's something going on there. There's two bodies of water meeting in that area. And so whenever that happens, there's an opportunity for the food chain to be kicking off. I mean, sometimes you see a temperature rise where you may have a little piece of the loop current pushing in, and that's tenderly a little bit bluer water, but not always. And that could be pushing up against. In our area, you tend to get a little bit more, when the water's a little greener, it's a little bit more nutrient rich. So there should be a collision of two waters kicking off the food chain. And then sometimes what happens is you have an upwelling. And a lot of times when you have that, you'll see sometimes a couple of degree temperature change, downward change. And that can typically, that's what you're looking for. You're going to get some good bites. And what tends to happen, and sometimes this happens, if you're fishing and you see and you notice that, a lot of times you'll see swordfish sunning on the surface when that happens. So,
interesting.
Cool fact.
Yeah, that's very
sometimes
cool.
they'll bite, sometimes they won't. I've never gotten one to bite. So,
yeah, I've seen that one time. It's definitely something to see, and we did not get it to bite either, Angelo. It's about 150-pound swordfish, though, so it got us fired up with a lot of hollering. We did good at hollering at it. If there was like a
we do a lot of that too.
Yeah, if there was like a prize for hollering at a swordfish, we won it. So
hollering and pushing your buddies out of the way,
right, and then pointing fingers after it's all over with, like, why didn't y'all get the bait in faster? Yeah, very cool.
I can
good
visualize
question.
all of that.
Yeah, good question, Quinn. Quinn submitted that question over at the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report Facebook page. Y'all can definitely get in on the Hey Cap questions over there, or you can email them to us at alabama@bestfishingreport.com. And if we choose your question, we'll be sending you a Fishbites prize pack, maybe a T-shirt. Man, we get all kind of stuff. We'll definitely hook you up. So we appreciate those. Angelo, you got any new hot real estate boating properties this week?
Oh, dude, let me tell you, we have been so busy. This is the time of year that people like to come to the beach. The weather's nice. It's not crowded. And buyers and sellers are really kind of, I say, connecting this time of year. So we have everything from, we just listed a little unit at Wolf Bay Villas. It's right there on Wolf Bay, kind of right at the T of 161 and Canal Road. Completely remodeled, granite countertops, wood plank, ceramic tile, great looking unit, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 204,500. That is a really good deal. If you're like, hey, I'd really love a place at the beach, place I could keep my boat, that's going to fit the bill. We got a place at the Grander, Grander is one of the few places that offers covered boat slips. It's 3-bedroom, 3.5 bath with an elevator, 2-car garage, and a 60-foot covered boat slip. We're at, I think, $549 on that. And let's see what else. Oh, awesome listing over at Kings Landing in Lillian. Big lot. Community pier with deeded boat slips, big views, $299, get you that. And we'll be bringing a awesome listing right on the point on Jubilee Point, right near Orange Beach Marina, facing the pass, just over 4,000 square foot. If you'll keep track on my Facebook page, probably next week we'll take that live, and we're going to be at 2.1 million on that. So we've got everything from houses to condos, from lower end price points to upper end price points. If you're looking to buy or sell in Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Perdido Key, get at me through my Facebook page, and or just call me 850-287-3440.
Angelo, what are you seeing out of interest rates right now? It seems like it's what I would call a neutral market. You know, it's a good time for buyers and sellers, and that sounds salesy, but it's not. I mean, I don't mean it to sound that way. It's interest rates are historically low. What are you seeing right now?
Interest rates are really low right now. So even though we've seen a slight increase in price, the offer for most people that are buying, that are in the buyer's market, it's almost too good to resist. I mean, I just literally had lunch with mortgage broker I like to use this week with a client, and he was saying that a lot of people that bought last year are actually refinancing this year because the savings are there. So, you know, I know Quinn Harrelson is a mortgage broker out of Montgomery. Joey Parker down in Gulf Shores. He's who does all my stuff. He does a great job. So yeah, I mean, get at somebody, you know, that you feel comfortable with, especially if you bought something the past couple of years, chances are you can save some money on the refi. And if you're looking to buy, it's a really good time. You're probably not going to find a lower interest rate in quite some time.
Yeah, it's good time for both sides. So, all right, buddy. Well, good to hear from you, and sounds like a good report. I hope you get out there and get after them. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, good deal. I'll let y'all later.
All right, see you, Angelo. Keep whacking them.
All right, see ya. Bye.
So what do you think, Patrick? You taking the old bay boat out wahoo hunting?
Man, I would seriously consider it because I've never caught a wahoo, but I may need to hire Angelo as my deckhand to make sure I can at least have a shot at it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you know, he was talking about over there off of Orange Beach, and, you know, and he's exactly right about Dolphin Island, except for if you keep your eyes on the blue water, we'll get a push of blue water. It's just one of those conditional things. You can't say when it's going to happen, but we'll always get a push of blue water that'll come in south of the island there. And some of the biggest wahoo that I've ever caught, and I know for a fact the state record wahoo came right there 10 to 15 miles south of Dauphin Island, pretty much just past the ships, just past the anchorage. I've always said, it's one of those things where the stars would have to align. You'd have to have your stuff ready to go, sitting on go. But I really think you could do some damage to the fish if you've got the conditions lined up. And even if you just had a bay boat, just go out there and fast troll out there in that blue water and match those conditions up right. And if you use something like a Hilton's offshore charts to keep an eye on that blue water, when it pushes in there, there's some nice fish right there, definitely within bay boat distance. This is not at all out of the realm of getting there and getting it done.
Might be something I add to my list.
Yeah. Captain Ugly's Wahoo charters coming soon.
Yeah, coming soon.
All right, man. Let's wrap this thing up with a good onshore report. Let's take it on over to Orange Beach Gulf Shores area and talk to Dusty Hayes. What you say, Dusty? Been a while, buddy. How you been doing?
Good, guys. How are y'all?
Doing great. Tell us about the onshore bite. You been doing some surf fishing lately?
Yeah. I do a lot more in the wintertime as inshore business slows down, and it's definitely picking up. November, December is some of my favorite times of the year to surf fish. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of good quality fish. Sometimes you're not catching the numbers, and some days you are, but even on the days where the numbers aren't there, the quality is. And we've been catching, a lot of good whiting. Some people in some spots have been catching them throughout the day. Myself, the bite's been just right before dark because they just hard and heavy. But, that changes with the tide. But we're catching fish, a lot of whiting, 10 to 15 inches and more. And also, too, there's a lot of pompano around. A lot of people catching nice pompano. My buddy got a double on Sunday afternoon of 2 20-inch fish.
Wow.
Using ghost shrimp, and he ended up catching, almost I think a Florida limit throughout the day, or a 2-man Florida limit actually throughout the day. All keepers, good fish. So lots of guys catching bull reds and black drum right now, and that's kind of sporadic. Further east they're kind of here and there. Whether you're in Orange Beach, Rodeo Key, Pensacola, or Gulf Shores area, you'll catch a red or a drum or maybe multiple each day. But if you go further down to Fort Morgan, you definitely have the more solid numbers of redfish and black drum. A lot of those guys using cut baits too, mullets and crabs, stuff like that. And there's just all kinds of potential in the surf this time of year. The one thing is you'll notice surf fishing wise, and say right now versus August or September, you may not get as many bites, but the bites you do get are more quality, something that most people are looking to put in the cooler, versus sometimes like in September or warmer months you have juvenile hardtails and juvenile Jack Crevalle, Spanish mackerel and ladyfish and bluefish and little sharks and just countless numbers of species, which is a cool thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of those guys are looking for whiting and a pompano and a redfish to put in their cooler, and November and December is a great time to do that. A lot of good quality fish, and like I said, even if it's a slower bite, the few bites you get will usually be a better quality fish by all means. And you also have a good push of permit in the fall. I mean, and we've seen more and more every year. It seems like this year is the most that we've ever seen, whether it's from inshore or on the beach, you name it, in our area. I've seen more permit caught this year than I ever have. And I know the growth of social media kind of aids to that, but even then it seems like there's more fish around. I saw one of the inshore guys at Orange Beach. He had probably a 6-man limit or so, which I guess he thought they were pompano, but he had, over 15 fish permit laid up on the dock.
Wow.
At Zeke's last week, this past weekend. So,
smokes.
You said that.
How big are those fish?
I think, and I don't know this for a fact, my guess is that they were kept thinking they were pompano, because it looked like it was 3 per person that each person was sending in the picture. I want to say there were 6 guys in the picture. They looked to be 14, 15-inch fish. The thing about, Alabama doesn't have any regulation on them whatsoever, because they're not really recognized as a fish that comes through here, even though they are caught on occasion, and we do have a state record. But, I guess if you were to keep one going by pompano standards or pompano regulations would be the right thing to do for sure. But the only thing about the permit with me is usually the ones we catch here, I mean, you do see a guy every once in a while catch a nice 5 or 6, 7 pound fish. I know a guy last fall got one that was right under 10 pounds, and he actually took it to Outcast in Pensacola. They were all debating on pompano or permit, and turned out it was a permit. He actually caught it at the East Jetty in Pensacola or Perdido Pass, but he said he caught it in Perdido Key. So he actually had the Alabama state record. He had no clue because I saw the picture later on after he'd already killed the fish. And, he's like, oh, yeah, I caught it in Florida. And, that's nothing for a Florida record, but he would have smashed the Alabama record. He just had no clue. But a lot of these fish that these people kill are like, 15 to 16, 17 inches. They're very thin. They don't really have much to them. I assume let them go, but, some people don't know any better, or some people, just do it just to do it. And there's technically nothing wrong with it.
So
interesting.
Backing up to what you were saying about the inshore guide with the permit, are those, and then you mentioned it a little bit later, are a lot of those fish coming off the jetties there at Perdido Pass? Is that a good spot right now?
I would think so. There's probably guys, I've seen guys cruise up and down the sandbars with jigs before on north wind days and find schools of pompano, and permit will be mixed in with them. The Perdido Pass would be majority of where they would come from, I would guess. I don't know for a fact, but that would definitely be my guess for sure. And this time of year on the jetties is, there's all kinds of stuff out there, from flounder to, bluefish to redfish to trout to you name it. Everything's kind of coming in or going out.
You mentioned flounder, and Alabama's got the November's closed for flounder, but that is typically when those fish migrate out, and we're really stack up there in the pass and all the passes along the northern Gulf, not just Perdido Pass, but Destin and Panama City, and those areas all get a big push of fish coming out. Are you starting to see those fish stacking up?
I really haven't, and I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm just speaking for myself on this. I rarely catch flounder anymore. When I was in high school, I used to catch a good number of them in the fall, whether it be gigging. I mean, normally a night like tonight, I'd be calling my buddies, figuring out where we're going gigging, and now we just don't even talk about it anymore. And I'm not saying they're not out there. I'm not, not saying that at all. It's just definitely got slower. I just, there was a time where it was nothing to get a plastic on a jig head and go walk Cotton Bayou and catch 10 flounder, August through November. And now, I know on my boat this year, I've only landed 4 flounder, and that was only 4, that I know of 8. They all came off the same 3 docks, or same like little series of 3 docks, and they were all 20 plus inch fish. And that was, I think it was 1 in May, 1 in June, 1 in July, 1 in August. And that was it. That's the only flounder I've had any part of this year. And I'm not saying that's the same for everybody, but normally you would, kind of catch one on the jetties or catch one on the docks or catch one doing this or this time of year. And it's kind of not as, I'm just going to say it's not as common. I'm sure if you really spent the time to go target them and only fish for flounder, you could probably catch some fish, but I just don't think they're as much as a bycatch as they were at one point.
Certainly not.
Let me step you back to surf fishing a little bit and ask you something I don't think we've ever asked you before, but what's your go-to rod and reel combo when it comes to the type of set fishing? And not necessarily set rigs, but just putting a rod in a rod holder. You're not casting to fish. What kind of rod and reel would you have somebody set up with if that's what that kind of fishing they want to do?
I go 2 ways, to somebody that's starting out, like say I was going to buy 2 rods tomorrow, or pretty much everything I need to get me started and grow from there. I would say get you a steelhead rod. I'm sure Matthew's mentioned it at some point, but a steelhead rod is what they use up in, Michigan area and the northeast or northwest coast for steelhead trout. And there's different variances of them, but it's basically like 8 to a 9, sometimes even 10-foot rod. It's just basically take your regular trout rod that we would use around here, like a 7.6 Terramar or whatever you would use. Just basically an inshore rod, but put a couple extra feet on there. So it's not a heavy rod. It's a real thin rod, lighter action, but it's got the length. And that to me is, I would only use those if it was up to me. And as far as pairing with a real 2,500 to 4,000, just depending on the rod, nothing big. And I like to use braid, anywhere from 15 to 20 pound braid on those. And what that allows you to do is, you can throw a 1 ounce pyramid sinker more than far enough, because most of the fish we're catching, especially whiting and pompano, on the calm days are very, very close to the shoreline. So you don't have to cast at a half mile. You just need, 10, 15, maybe 20 yards. So that light rod allows you to do that. And, you're not holding this huge rod and reel combo if you're trying to fight a fish. It's 9 times out of 10, the biggest fish you catch of the day comes off that lightest rod. Now, I can't tell you how many times it's like, you got 2 10, 11 foot Paraflex surf rods with a 5,000 reel and 30-pound braid. And then you got the little ultralight over here getting smoked by a big black drum. And you can land that fish. I've never, ever, not once had an issue with breaking off a fish or losing a fish just because it's too light a rod, too light a tackle. Those fish on the beach, they're not going to run out. They usually run left to right or east to west in our case. And they're not going to run out. They're not going to spoil you. You can walk down the beach and, follow those fish, and you don't have to worry about anything. I use light wire hooks and 15-pound leader and a light rod, and, we're catching 30-inch redfish and drum quite often this time of year on that. As far as the heavier side of things goes, when you do need that distance and you want to get a little further out, past where your steelhead rods are covering, I like anywhere from a 10 to 11 foot. There's all kinds of good brands out there. You can go with just a cheap Penn Prevail rod. Those are great surf rods for the money. They're around $80. Or you can go up to, I like the Star Paraflex. I use a 10-6, so it's got a soft tip, and it can throw a 2, a 3, or a 4-ounce trim and sinker a mile. And it's a lightweight rod, good action. And then, 4, 5, or 6,000 size reel, just depending on what you're planning on doing with it, with around 30-pound braid. 30-pound braid's a kind of a sweet spot for me. It's a, light diameter, small diameter. You can hold plenty of it, more than you really ever need. And it casts very well. It's so thin that it casts super well. So if you were to really start with two, as far as set baits, those are two good ones to go with. You can use both of them on a calm day. You can put the big one out far. You can keep the little one in close. And then say you do have some rougher conditions, you can use that big one to get out there, pierce that wind, and use that bigger weight to hold in that current wind and all that good stuff. So that's kind of like a good go-to. And then I usually go from there and kind of build your arsenal up. I wish I could say I only had 2 rods, but I don't.
Right. No, we knew that wasn't the case, Dusty. Don't worry. Well, good deal, man. Sounds like the onshore is getting just right. And that brings us to this week's onshore tip. It's brought to us by Fishbites. Are you tired of scrambling for bait whenever you decide to go fishing? Have an artificial bait that's better than live bait, ready to go at a moment's notice with Fishbites. It's easy to pack and travel with, and shelf stable, and not to mention tough. With Fishbites, the bait stays on the hook and the fish stay on the bait. Check out the full line of scented saltwater and freshwater baits and tackle at fishbites.com. I noticed that they are starting to carry some pompano rigs, which is awesome for guys like me, because even though I know how to tie a pompano rig, I don't use enough of them in the year to really worry about it. I just go get some pre-made rigs, and I like to see that they're starting to carry those. Dusty, what's your go-to fish bite this time of year?
I usually stick. It's kind of the same as the rest of the year. I always have sand flea, which is the orange and white. That's the only color they make in it. I wish they would make another color in it, but it does work out because it's pretty accurate. Sand flea colors, orange and white, and then a shrimp. It doesn't really matter what color. A lot of the color goes on. It's really personal preference. I think it's one of those things that's for the fishermen, not necessarily for the fish. But if you do have different water clarities, if it's clear water, and we, as they call it, Emerald Coast, you have that green color. I love pink, whether it be pink beads, pink floats, or pink fish bites. That pink really does good for me. If you have dirtier water, a lot of guys will go with that green or chartreuse, yellow fish bites, and that works really good too. So,
I like it.
But orange and white, definitely good. And also too, there are times where it's just super, super calm, super clear. No water movement in that white. It's just something very subtle. It kind of blends in. It's not very loud and obtruding. It's just there. It's very natural.
I like it. Well, what are you thinking for an onshore tip?
Yeah. So as far as the tip goes, something that a lot of people don't really do. Most people they'll kind of stick with 1 or 2 rigs and just do shrimp. There's nothing wrong with that. A big drum or redfish will definitely eat shrimp. But if you want to change it up and kind of double your chances of getting that big kicker fish for the day, a small whiting or a pinfish, a mullet. I see a lot of people snag mullet off the beach when they're migrating this time of year. All those fish make great cut baits. You can get them, and it doesn't take much. Just a chunk, maybe an inch wide, maybe an inch tall, and put that on I usually use a 1 to 2 aught Kahle hook, or same thing with a circle hook, whatever you prefer, around 30-pound full carbon leader or monofilament. I think either one's fine. Some people go 40 or 50. Any of it would really be fine. And I'll usually do a single drop rig. Throw that fresh cut bait out there. When that bait, as it gets colder and colder and colder, you know, the bait source is kind of dwindles down. So a lot of those fish are really searching. They're, you know, what they're looking for, the few sand fleas that are left. You know, any ghost shrimp that comes by, any crab, anything they can find, they'll usually eat. And so they'll really take advantage of that. So if you just put a fresh, you know, if you catch a whiting, I'll fillet them and then chunk them and throw it back out there. You know, it's a great way to pick up an extra kicker fish. Also, too, you know, a lot of guys will catch blue crabs in the surf. You know, the crabs will mess with you and take your bait, and you reel them in every once in a while. Those guys work good. And actually, the past few days, we've had a lot of calico crabs, the little sand crabs, ghost crab. I don't think they're ghost crabs. I think they're different, but I call them calicos. They're tan with the white specks. And, you know, they'll eat your shrimp and fish bites while it's sitting out there on your lighter rods. And I ended up catching 3 or 4 yesterday and, you know, popping them in half and chunking them back out there. And the redfish and drum, I absolutely love them because as it gets cooler, you know, those crabs, they don't really go anywhere. They might bury up in the sand, but they're not, you know, leaving town and going south or anything like that. You know, they stay in that surf line. So there's definitely a forage for any, you know, beach dwelling redfish or drum.
I like it. I hadn't thought about using the calico crabs, but I definitely see them out there, and they certainly take some bait. So I'm going to take my chunk out of the calicos next time I go out.
Yeah, anything going down the beach definitely eats them. If you look at the covia's stomach, that's one of the main things you'll find in the springtime when they're cruising that beach is calico crabs, and among plenty of other things. But that seems to be a consistent thing is those calico crabs, and you'll find them a lot in redfish too.
Well, Dusty, I got a question about, just to go back to the cut bait on like the whiting or pinfish or something like that. Have you ever just butterflied that fish out, or do you always just like to take that fillet off the side and throw it out?
It depends on the size. You know, if it's a lot of times you're just whiting that are, you know, 3, 4, 5 inches long, I'll use them live sometimes. That kind of cuts out the black drum side of things. I'm sure you know as well as I do, they're not really a predator. You know, they're more of a scavenger. Right. If you do throw live whiting out there, redfish usually eat it. And a lot of times in the winter, bluefish get after it if it's alive. There's a lot of big blues that cruise the surf in the, you know, December, January times. But I will butterfly the ones that are around 4 to 6 inches, and I'll use head and fillets. If it's a bigger one, which, you know, you start getting much bigger, that's when you start eating them. I'll usually just fillet them and chunk them. But the thing about it is a lot of the bigger ones that I've caught, and I'm not saying this is a fact, this is just with me, a lot of the biggest reds I've caught off the beach with cut whiting, I mean, it's a piece, just a small piece, I mean, like an inch long, you know. So when it's cold, it's, you know, you don't have as much, you don't have the pinfish out there and the croakers and all that stuff just picking at it. I mean, that bait just sits. So it doesn't necessarily take much. But yeah, the definitely a butterfly whiting or a pinfish does do well. So,
Dusty, you guide inshore as well as onshore trips in the Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Perdido Key area. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do it?
Best way to contact me is just call my phone. It's 678-897-0167. You can call me or text me anytime. I'll get back with you almost right away. Usually, we usually try to. So we have 2 boats. We actually have 3 boats in Orange Beach and right at Cree Marina. And as far as the beach goes, I can come to you or you can come to me, and we kind of cover all the bases on this side of town.
Sounds good, buddy. Well, thanks for the report. Stay safe out there, man.
All right,
guys, you too.
Patrick, you know, here we are in November. Hunting season started. I felt like, you know, when we started this podcast a year and a half ago, I was curious as to how it was going to be received in these late fall and winter months. And I've been really excited and pleased to see that the downloads are way, way up as we look at them, you know, year over year. And we kind of compare notes on what we were doing last year and what's happening this year. And it just tells me that there's still plenty of folks that are getting after it, getting out there and getting after it. And I would have thought it would be a bigger fall off than it has been, but there's still a lot of folks that are enjoying this good fishing that we've got going on right now.
There's a lot of different options, and I mean, our contributors just showed that from the beach to offshore to inshore. I mean, there's a lot of different options out there, and I can promise you, there's a lot of people interested in fall fishing right now because my from text messages to phone calls that I'm getting every day, like, hey, what's going on? How's the water looking? Where the fish biting? Blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of interest in this cooler weather fishing. So especially on the inshore side of things.
Well, October felt like August anyway, so it's really our first month of fall. So, boy, I know. For me, it's Thanksgiving. That's when it kind of kicks off. I really look forward to my family being back in town. We usually go and get some of that good river fishing in and enjoy some of those estuaries and just love those crisp fall days and catching those speckled trout. I still say they smell different this time of year, but I don't know. I do. The fish in the rivers smell different.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. There may be some truth to that.
All right, buddy. Well, what'd you learn today?
Well, I'm thinking back and listening to Richard and Angelo and Dusty, and every one of them had something specific about bait, and it was all natural bait. Richard talking about the finger mullet and putting a lot of effort into, hey, we got to get these finger mullet to catch these flounder. Angelo talking about the small blackfin being a really big key input to their tuna fishing. And Dusty talking about capturing catching these small whiting and utilizing those as redfish bait and black drum bait. So anyway, it sounded like natural bait right now was kind of at the cusp and really at the forefront of everybody's mind as to where they're going the next couple of weeks. Things will change as it gets colder, but I think right now you got to focus on some natural stuff out there, and that's what I took away from it.
It sounds like it's worth your time to take whatever time it takes to get the right bait, at least from what these guys are telling us.
Exactly.
I think what my favorite little pearl of wisdom, as I like to call them, was Richard really helped me think about my flounder fishing in a different way. I've always been, pretty standard Carolina rig, take a bull minnow or a finger mullet, hook him up through the lips and drag him around till I found a flounder. And hearing Richard talk about hooking him behind the dorsal, dragging that fish into a new area, and then just kind of visualizing that mullet, doing kind of a 180 from his new position to not to letting the mullet go find the flounder somewhat, and also just let him flash around down there and let him make some noise. And hopefully, if there's a flounder somewhere close, he's going to move his way over. That's definitely going to improve my flounder fishing the next time I go.
Oh, that definitely some great tips. And it is something. I'm with you. I've always been kind of a nose hook or a lip hook on my bait fish, and it's something that I've been experimenting with, and and even on the trout side of things, I've done more belly hooking bait fish for the exact same reason, to where you're presenting that bait in a different manner, providing some more action to the predatory fish, and they actually come to you instead of you trying to come to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap it up this week. Y'all please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like us to email you the podcast, just head over to greatdaysoutdoors.com/ASFR, and we'll send you the new show each week. We certainly appreciate all those reviews. If you've listened to the show and you're enjoying the show, or you're not enjoying the show, head on over to iTunes and give us a review. We really appreciate it. It really helps the show as well. Rankings are important, and it really helps, and we really appreciate all the support you guys are giving us. So until next week, you guys stay safe out there. We'll see you again on the flip side.
Keep whacking them, guys.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report has been brought to you by Hilton's Real-Time Navigator, bringing you the highest quality online satellite fishing chart since 2004. Your source for sea temps, altimetry, currents, and watercolor at hiltonsoffshore.com.
And also KillerDock. Are you suffering from dock dysfunction? Check out a full line of dock enhancement at KillerDock.com. That's KillerDock.com.
Also brought to you by Foster Contracting, Fortified Roofing Pros. Did you know you can save up to 40% on your homeowner's insurance with a fortified roof? Learn more at fortifiedroofingpros.com or call them at 251-973-9999.
This week's Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Angelo Depaola, the Coastal Connection with EXP Realty, your boating and beach property specialist. Check me out on Facebook at Angelo Depaola Realtor, the Coastal Connection, or call me direct at 850-287-3440.
And also, Great Days Outdoors, the South's finest hunting and fishing magazine. Pick up your copy wherever magazines are sold or check them out at greatdaysoutdoors.com. This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report was brought to you by me, Joe Baya, and National Land Realty. If I can help you in any way with the purchase or sale of land in Alabama or Florida, whether it's timberland, farmland, recreational land like hunting land, or even agricultural land or ranch land like horse farm, drop me a message at jbaya@nationalland.com. That's JBAYA@nationalland.com.